Who is the most important person in your life? Now, many of you might say your spouse, your children, your parents. That's very noble, but I want to suggest something profound today. The most important person in your life must be you. Not out of ego, but out of necessity. Because if you don't become the best version of yourself, what will you have to offer others? You know, I grew up on an Idaho farm. We didn't have much. My father always said, Jim, we're not poor, we just don't have any money. And there's wisdom in that distinction. Poverty is a mindset. Having no money is just a temporary condition. But the difference comes down to how you think about yourself, whether you believe you're capable of creating value, solving problems, and building a life of abundance. I remember when I was 25 years old, I was broke, discouraged, and wondering if things would ever change. Then my mentor, Mr. Schoaf, asked me, Jim, how much are you working on yourself? And I said, what do you mean? He said, if you want your life to change, you have to change. If you want things to get better, you have to get better. That was the turning point for me. I realized I had been waiting for circumstances to change when I should have been focusing on changing myself. Let me share a principle with you that transformed my life. For things to change, you have to change. For things to get better, you have to get better. For things to improve, you have to improve. When you grow, everything in your life grows with you. And it all starts with how you think about yourself. Now, what does it mean to think about yourself? It means taking inventory of your current situation with brutal honesty. Where are you now? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What skills do you need to develop? What habits are holding you back? What beliefs are limiting your potential? This kind of self-reflection isn't selfish, it's essential. You see, your income, your relationships, your health, your happiness, they're all reflections of who you are. If you want more, you must become more. It's that simple. And the wonderful thing about personal development is that once you improve yourself, you never go back to the old dimensions. Growth is permanent. Let me tell you about two people I knew. They both started in similar situations with similar opportunities. 5 years later, one was making $50,000 a year, and the other was making $500,000 a year. What was the difference? Was one working 10 times harder? No, the difference wasn't how they thought about themselves, their identity, their capabilities, their worth. The person making $500,000 didn't just think about making more money. They thought about becoming the kind of person who could command that income through value creation. They focused on their skills, their mindset, their network, their time management. They thought about themselves not selfishly, but strategically. You must understand this fundamental truth: the marketplace pays for value. It doesn't pay for time, it pays for value. And your value is directly tied to your personal development. So when I say think about yourself always, I'm saying always be thinking about how you can develop yourself to create more value. Here's a mistake many people make. They think more about their problems than their potential. They focus on what's wrong instead of what could be right. They think about what they lack instead of what they could create. And that's backwards thinking, because your life doesn't get better by chance, it gets better by change. And that change starts with how you think about yourself. Let me give you a formula that changed my life. Success equals a few simple disciplines practiced every day. And failure is just a few errors in judgment repeated every day. Both are cumulative. That's why you must think about yourself always, your daily disciplines, your small decisions, your little habits, because they compound over time to create your destiny. Now, some people say, but Jim, isn't it selfish to think about myself? And I say, no, what's selfish is to not develop yourself to your full potential and thus limit what you can give to others. If you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of anyone else. If you don't value yourself, you can't add value to others. If you don't invest in yourself, you'll have nothing to give as a return on investment to the marketplace. Let me tell you about the ant philosophy. I've studied ants for a long time, and here's what I've learned. First, ants never quit. If something is in their way, they go over it, under it, around it, through it, but they don't quit. Second, ants think winter all summer. They're constantly preparing for the challenges ahead. Third, ants think summer all winter. Even in their darkest hour, they maintain hope for better days. Fourth, ants do all they can. How much does an ant gather in summer to prepare for winter? All it possibly can. That's how you should think about yourself, with that same determination, that same foresight, that same optimism, that same commitment to maximum effort. Not some of what you can do, but all that you can do. You know, I'm often asked, Jim, how can I be successful? And I say success is nothing more mysterious than the progressive realization of a worthy ideal. It's not a destination, it's a process. It's becoming a little bit better today than you were yesterday. It's making small improvements consistently over time. And to do that, you must be constantly thinking about yourself, evaluating yourself, challenging yourself, investing in yourself. Now, let me be clear about something. Thinking about yourself doesn't mean being self-centered. It means being self-aware. There's a profound difference. Self-centered people think the world revolves around them. Self-aware people understand that their world is created by them, by their thoughts, their actions, their habits. I want to talk about something important, your personal philosophy. Your philosophy determines your attitude. Your attitude determines your actions. Your actions determine your results. And your results determine your lifestyle. So if you want to change your lifestyle, you don't start there. You start by examining and refining your philosophy. And what is philosophy but how you think about life and how you think about yourself within that life? Ask yourself, what do I want to be remembered for? What contribution do I want to make? What skills do I need to develop? What knowledge do I need to acquire? What relationships do I need to nurture? These questions force you to think deeply about yourself, not in a narcissistic way, but in a responsible way. You see, if you don't design your own life plan, chances are you'll fall into someone else's plan. And guess what they have planned for you? Not much. Not much at all. That's why you must think about yourself, your goals, your values, your vision for your life. Because if you don't, nobody else will. Here's a powerful question to ask yourself. If I were to follow me, would I be pleased with where I'm being led? That requires honest self-reflection. It requires thinking about yourself as both a leader and a follower of your own principles. It's taking responsibility for the example you're setting. You know, one of the greatest gifts you can give to others is the example of your own life working. Not perfect, but working, progressive, growing, evolving. That's why personal development isn't selfish. It's one of the most generous things you can do. Because when you grow, you inspire others to grow. When you transform, you demonstrate to others that transformation is possible. Let me share something with you about wealth. True wealth isn't about having a lot. It's about becoming a lot. I'd rather have $1 million in wisdom than $1 million in my bank account. Because if I have the wisdom, I can always recreate the money if I lose it. But if I have the money without the wisdom, I'll surely lose it, and I won't know how to get it back. That's why thinking about yourself, particularly your education, your skills, your character is the best investment you can make. Not just in financial terms, but in terms of your overall quality of life. Because life doesn't just happen to you, it happens through you and your development. Consider this, whatever you don't change, you choose. If there's an area of your life you're not satisfied with, your health, your income, your relationships, and you're not actively working to change it, then by default you're choosing it. That's a sobering thought, isn't it? But it's empowering too, because it means the power to change is always within your control. Now, some people say, Jim, I don't have the time to work on myself. I'm too busy dealing with life's demands. And to that, I say, you don't find time for important things, you make time. We all have the same 24 hours. The difference is in how we prioritize those hours. And if you don't prioritize your own development, you're essentially saying that everything and everyone else is more important than you are. And that's not just wrong, it's unsustainable. You know what fascinates me? The difference between successful people and unsuccessful people is rarely dramatic. It's usually just a few key disciplines repeated every day. The successful person has formed the habit of doing what the unsuccessful person doesn't like to do. Not that they like doing either necessarily, but their dislike is subordinated by the strength of their purpose. That's why you need to think about yourself specifically, your purpose. What drives you? What matters to you? What are you working toward? When your why is strong enough, the how becomes easier. When your purpose is clear, the sacrifices become worthwhile. Let me tell you about two salespeople I once knew. They both faced the same rejection rate, but the same market conditions, the same product challenges. But one was crushed by rejection while the other was fueled by it. What was the difference? One took rejection personally, the other took it professionally. One thought of himself as a victim, the other thought of himself as a student. It all came down to how they thought about themselves in relation to their circumstances. You see, circumstances don't determine who you are. They reveal who you are. And more importantly, how you respond to circumstances shapes who you become. That's why self-awareness, thinking about yourself, is so crucial. It allows you to catch yourself in the act of being yourself, for better or worse, and make adjustments accordingly. Here's something to ponder. You are not your circumstances. You are your possibilities. You are not defined by what happens to you, but by how you respond to what happens to you. That response comes from how you think about yourself, your identity, your capabilities, your resilience. I want to talk about something many people overlook, the power of your internal dialogue. The way you talk to yourself matters tremendously. If you constantly tell yourself, I can't afford it, your brain stops looking for solutions. But if you ask yourself, how can I afford it? Your brain starts generating creative possibilities. The difference is subtle but profound. And it all comes down to how you think about yourself as a victim of circumstances or as a creator of opportunities. You know, I've found that most people overestimate what they can do in a year and underestimate what they can do in 10 years. Why? Because they don't appreciate the power of compound growth both financially and personally. Just as money compounds over time through interest, you compound over time through consistent personal development. Small improvements made daily lead to remarkable transformations over the long term. That's why thinking about yourself isn't about instant gratification. It's about playing the long game. It's about making investments today that will pay dividends for years and decades to come. It's about planting seeds now that will grow into trees under whose shade you may never sit. That's not selfish, that's legacy thinking. Now let me address something important: balance. When I say think about yourself always, I don't mean to the exclusion of thinking about others. In fact, the most fulfilled people I know think about themselves precisely so they can be more valuable to others. They develop themselves so they have more to give. They strengthen themselves so they can be a source of strength for those around them. Consider this: on an airplane, they always tell you to put on your own oxygen mask before helping others. Why? Because if you pass out from lack of oxygen, you can't help anyone else. The same principle applies to life. You must take care of yourself, your health, your mind, your spirit before you can effectively care for others. It's not selfish, it's strategic. I want to introduce you to a concept that changed my life, the slight edge. Success doesn't require quantum leaps. It requires small, consistent actions performed over time. Reading 10 pages of a good book every day. Saving a small percentage of your income consistently. Expressing gratitude daily. These simple disciplines, practiced regularly, create massive results over time. But you have to think about yourself, your habits, your choices, your consistency to maintain that slight edge. Let me tell you about the law of sowing and reaping. Whatever you sow, you shall reap. If you sow excuses, you reap failure. If you sow discipline, you reap achievement. If you sow personal development, you reap growth. The seeds you plant today determine the harvest you'll collect tomorrow. That's why you must be thoughtful about what you're planting in the garden of your mind and life. Now, there are two types of pain in life: the pain of discipline and the pain of regret. The pain of discipline weighs ounces, the pain of regret weighs tons, and the choice is always yours. That's why thinking about yourself, your choices, your disciplines, your investments is so crucial. Because those choices compound over time to create either your success or your regret. Let me share something with you about joy. Joy doesn't come from having, it comes from becoming. It doesn't come from possessing, it comes from progressing. The happiest people I know aren't necessarily the ones with the most. They're the ones who are actively engaged in becoming more and more skilled, more knowledgeable, more compassionate, more impactful. That's why personal development isn't just about success, it's about fulfillment. You know, I'm often asked, Jim, what's the secret to happiness? And I say, there is no secret. Happiness is the natural result of personal growth and contribution. When you're growing as a person and contributing to others, happiness takes care of itself. But that growth starts with how you think about yourself, your potential, your progress, your purpose. Consider this: everything you want in life exists outside your comfort zone. Financial freedom exists outside your comfort zone. Deep, meaningful relationships exist outside your comfort zone. Vibrant health exists outside your comfort zone. So if you want to grow, you must be willing to be uncomfortable. You must be willing to do what others won't do so you can have what others won't have. That's why thinking about yourself, your comfort zones, your fears, your resistance to change is so important. Because until you confront these internal barriers, you'll always be limited by them. Growth happens when you step beyond your self-imposed limitations and discover what's possible on the other side. Let me tell you about the concept of the 5-year plan. Where will you be 5 years from now? Will you be in the same place, facing the same challenges, living with the same limitations? Or will you be in a completely different place because of the personal development investments you've made? The choice is yours, but it starts with how you think about yourself today and what you believe is possible for your future. You know, one of my mentors taught me something profound: work harder on yourself than you do on your job. Why? Because if you work hard on your job, you'll make a living. But if you work hard on yourself, you'll make a fortune. Not just financially, but in terms of your overall quality of life. That's why self-investment, thinking about yourself and your development, is the highest yielding investment you'll ever make. Let me be clear about something. When I say think about yourself always, I'm not suggesting you should be self-absorbed or narcissistic. I'm saying you should be self-aware and self-responsible. there's a world of difference. Self-absorbed people think the world owes them something. Self-responsible people ask, what can I contribute? But to contribute at your highest level, you must develop yourself to your highest potential. Consider this paradox. The more you give, the more you receive. But you can only give what you have. That's why developing yourself isn't selfish. It's the prerequisite for meaningful service. The more knowledge you have, the more knowledge you can share. The more wealth you create, the more wealth you can distribute. The more love you cultivate, the more love you can express. You know, I've observed that most people major in minor things. They focus on the trivial many instead of the vital few. They react to urgency instead of responding to importance. And as a result, they never develop the depth, the mastery, or the excellence that comes from focused self-development. That's why thinking about yourself, your priorities, your focus, your most valuable contributions is essential for a life of significance. Let me share something powerful with you. You don't get paid for the hour, you get paid for the value you bring to the hour. And your value is directly tied to your personal development. The more you learn, the more you can earn. The more problems you can solve, the more income you can generate. The more value you can create, the more wealth you can accumulate. It's that simple. That's why thinking about yourself, your skills, your knowledge, your problem-solving abilities isn't selfish. It's economically essential. In a free market economy, income is largely determined by value creation. And the more valuable you become, the more income you can command. Now, let's talk about something fundamental, your beliefs about yourself. What do you believe is possible for you? What do you believe you deserve? What do you believe you're capable of? These beliefs form the foundation of your identity, and your identity shapes your actions, which determine your results. That's why thinking about yourself, your beliefs, your identity, your self-image is so crucial. Because if you believe you're worth $50,000 a year, you'll find a way to make $50,000 a year. But if you believe you're worth $500,000 a year, you'll find a way to make $500,000 a year. Your income rarely exceeds your self-image. So if you want to earn more, you must become more in your own mind first. Let me tell you about two types of pain, the pain of discipline and the pain of regret. The pain of discipline is temporary. The pain of regret is permanent. The pain of discipline weighs ounces. The pain of regret weighs tons. And the choice is always yours. That's why thinking about yourself, your choices, your disciplines, your investments in yourself is so important. Because those choices compound over time to create either your success or your regret. You know, one of the most powerful questions you can ask yourself is this: what would the person I want to become do next? That question forces you to think about your ideal future self and then align your present actions with that vision. It's a form of self-awareness that bridges the gap between who you are and who you want to be. Consider this: your life is like a book. And every day you write a new page through your thoughts, words, and actions. If someone were to read the book of your life, would they be inspired? Would they be moved? Would they learn something valuable? These questions require you to think about yourself not just as you are, but as you could be as an author writing a story worth reading. Let me share something important. The quality of your life is determined by the quality of your questions. If you ask yourself limiting questions like, why can't I succeed? Or why don't I have enough time? You'll get limiting answers. But if you ask yourself empowering questions like, how can I succeed? Or how can I make better use of my time? You'll get empowering answers. The difference comes down to how you think about yourself as a victim or as a creator. You know, I found that the key to financial freedom isn't making more money. It's becoming the kind of person who can make more money and keep it. It's developing the mindset, the skills, and the habits of someone who creates and preserves wealth. That's why thinking about yourself, your financial education, your relationship with money, your wealth-building strategies is so essential for achieving true financial independence. Let me tell you about a conversation I had with a young man who wanted to become wealthy. He asked me, Jim, where can I find $1 million? And I said, you don't find $1 million, you earn it. And to earn it, you must become $1 million person. That's the secret to wealth creation. It's not about finding money, it's about becoming a kind of person who attracts money through value creation. Consider this truth: success is not something you pursue, it's something you attract by the person you become. You don't go after success, you attract success by developing yourself into someone worthy of success. That's why thinking about yourself, your character, your competence, your contribution is the foundation of all sustainable achievement. You know, I've observed that we tend to attract what we are, not what we want. If you want better relationships, become a better person. If you want more respect, become more respectable. If you want more success, become more valuable. The external world is a reflection of your internal world. That's why personal development isn't optional. It's essential for creating the life you desire. Let me share a principle that transforms my understanding of success. You will get what you are, not what you need. The marketplace doesn't reward need, it rewards value. Your paycheck is determined not by your needs, but by your contribution. That's why thinking about yourself, your value proposition, your unique contributions, your problem-solving abilities is so crucial for professional advancement. Consider this. Most people think if I had more money, I could do more things and then I would be happier. But that's backwards. The correct sequence is when I become more, I can do more, and then I will have more. It all starts with who you are, with your personal development. That's why thinking about yourself, your growth, your mindset, your capabilities is the foundation of all achievement. You know, I'm often asked, Jim, how can I achieve work-life balance? And I say, there's no such thing as work-life balance. There's only work-life integration. And the key to integration is not time management, but energy management. It's knowing how to renew yourself physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually so you can bring your best self to every area of life. That's why thinking about yourself, your energy, your renewal practices, your boundaries is so important. Because when you're depleted, you have nothing to give. But when you're energized, you can accomplish remarkable things in less time and with less stress. Let me share something profound. The most valuable gift you can give to others is your own personal development. When you grow, everyone in your life benefits. Your family gets a better you. Your employer gets a better you. Your friends get a better you. Your community gets a better you. That's why self-investment, thinking about yourself and your growth, is actually one of the most gingerous things you can do. Consider this paradox. To serve others effectively, you must focus on yourself intentionally. Not out of selfishness, but out of stewardship of your talents, your time, your energy, your potential. Because you can't give what you don't have, and you can't lead where you haven't been. You know, I've found that most people are held back not by their capability, but by their character. Not by their talent, but by their discipline. Not by what they can do, but by what they choose to do. That's why thinking about yourself, your character, your integrity, your work ethic is so essential for lasting success. Because while talent may open doors, it's character that keeps them open. Let me tell you about the concept of the slight edge. The slight edge is the small advantage that over time creates massive success. It's reading 10 pages of a good book every day, saving a small percentage of your income consistently. It's expressing gratitude daily. These simple disciplines, practiced regularly, create massive results over time. But you have to think about yourself, your habits, your choices, your consistency to maintain that slight edge. Consider this truth. Success is neither magical nor mysterious. Success is the natural consequence of consistently applying basic fundamentals. But most people look for the complex, the sophisticated, the quick fix. They want the pill, the potion, the program that promises overnight results. But sustainable success doesn't work that way. It requires patient, persistent application of proven principles. That's why thinking about yourself, your daily habits, your small choices, your incremental improvements is so important. Because success isn't about doing extraordinary things, it's about doing ordinary things extraordinarily well. You know, I've observed that most people desperately want to change their results without changing themselves. They want more money, but they don't want to become more valuable. They want better relationships, but they don't want to become better communicators. They want more freedom, but they don't want to develop more discipline. And that's a fundamental misunderstanding of how life works. Let me be clear, your income can grow only to the extent that you do. Your wealth can increase only to the extent that you do. Your influence can expand only to the extent that you do. That's why personal development, thinking about yourself and your growth, is the master skill that makes all other skills possible. Consider this. There are three kinds of people in the world. Those who make things happen, those who watch things happen, and those who wonder what happened. Which are you? The answer depends on how you think about yourself as a creator, a spectator, a victim. You know, one of the most important decisions you'll ever make is who you decide to become. Not what car to buy or what house to live in or what job to take, but who you decide to be. Because that decision shapes all other decisions. That's why thinking about yourself, your vision for your life, your definition of success, your personal standards is the foundation of a meaningful existence. Let me share something powerful with you. Formal education will make you a living. Self-education will make you a fortune. School ends, but your education should never end. The moment you stop learning is the moment you start dying. That's why thinking about yourself, your ongoing education, your skill development, Your knowledge acquisition is essential for remaining valuable in a rapidly changing world. Consider this: the greatest gift you can give yourself is the gift of possibility. The understanding that you are not fixed but fluid, not static but dynamic, not finished but evolving. This mindset that you can grow, change, and become more is the foundation of all personal development. And it starts with how you think about yourself. You know, I've observed that poverty is a mindset before it's a financial condition. Wealth is a mindset before it's a bank balance. Health is a mindset before it's a physical state. That's why thinking about yourself, your mindset, your beliefs, your paradigms is so crucial. Because your outer world will always be a reflection of your inner world. Let me tell you about a powerful principle. You don't get what you want, you get what you are. If you want more, you must become more. If you want better, you must become better. If you want different, you must become different. That's why personal development, thinking about yourself and your growth, is the master key to life's treasures. Consider this truth: life doesn't get better by chance, it gets better by change. And that change begins with how you think about yourself, your potential, your purpose, your possibilities. Because when you change how you see yourself, you change how you see everything else. And when your perspective shifts, your life shifts. As we conclude our time together, remember this: the most important investment you will ever make is in yourself. Not in stocks, not in real estate, not in cryptocurrencies, but in you. In your mind, your skills, your health, your character. Because those investments will pay dividends long after other investments have come and gone. So think about yourself always not out of selfishness, but out of stewardship. Because you have been entrusted with a precious gift, your life, your talents, your potential. And what you do with that gift is your gift back to the world. Thank you for your time today. It's been a privilege to share these ideas with you.